Howdy again. Jump into it. 1 Samuel 18. Now it came about, when he had finished speaking to Saul, that Jonathan committed himself to David, and Jonathan loved him as himself. And Saul took him that day, and did not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David, because he had loved him as himself. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him, and gave it to David, and his military gear, including his sword, his bow, and his belt. And David went into battle wherever Saul sent him, and always achieved success. So Saul put him in charge of the men of war, and it was pleasing in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. Now it happened, as they were coming, when David returned from killing the Philistine, that the woman came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with joy, and with other musical instruments. The women sang as they played and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Then Saul became very angry, for this lyric displeased him, and he said, They have given David credit for 10,000s, but to me they have given credit for only thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David with suspicion from that day on. Now it came about on the next day that an evil spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved in the midst of the house while David was playing the harp with his hand, as usual. And a spear was in Saul's hand. Then Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall. But David escaped from his presence twice. Now Saul was afraid of David, because the Lord was with him, but had left Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence, and appointed him as his commander of 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. David was successful in all his ways, for the Lord is with him. When Saul saw that he was very successful, he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for he would go out to battle and return before them. Then Saul said to David, Here is my older daughter Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. Only be a valiant man for me, and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul thought, My hand shall not be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him. But David said to Saul, Who am I, and who is my family, or my father's family in Israel, that I should be the king's son-in-law? So it came about at that time that Merab, Saul's daughter, was to be given to David, that she was given instead to Adriel the Mahalathite as a wife. Now Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David. When they informed Saul, the thing was pleasing to him. For Saul thought, I will give her to him so that she may become a trap for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore Saul said to David, For a second time you may become my son-in-law today. Then Saul commanded his servants, Speak to David in secret, saying, Behold, the king delights in you, and all his servants love you. Now then, become the king's son-in-law. So Saul's servants spoke these words to David. But David said, Is it trivial in your sight to become the king's son-in-law, since I am only a poor man and insignificant? Then Saul's servants reported to him, saying, These are the words David spoke. Saul then said, This is what you shall say to David. The king does not desire any dowry except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, to take vengeance on the king's enemies. But Saul plotted to have David fall by the hand of the Philistines. When his servants told David these words, it pleased David to become the king's son-in-law. So before the time had expired, David set out and went, he and his men, and fatally struck 200 men among the Philistines. Then David brought their foreskins, and they presented all 200 of them to the king, so that he might become the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him his daughter Michal, as a wife. When Saul saw and realized that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him, then Saul was even more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy continually. Then the commanders of the Philistines went to battle, and it happened as often as they went out that David was more successful than all the servants of Saul, so his name was held in high esteem. 1 Samuel 19. Now Saul told his son Jonathan and all his servants to put David to death. But Jonathan, Saul's son, greatly delighted in David. So Jonathan informed David, saying, My father Saul is seeking to put you to death. Now then, please be on your guard in the morning, and stay in a hidden place and conceal yourself. And as for me, I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are hiding. And I will speak with my father about you, and whatever I find out, I will tell you." Then Jonathan spoke well of David to his father Saul, and said to him, "May the king not sin against his servant David, since he has not sinned against you, and since his deeds have been very beneficial to you. For he took his life in his hand and struck the Philistine, and the Lord brought about a great victory for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then would you sin against innocent blood by putting David to death for no reason?" Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan, and Saul vowed, "As the Lord lives, David shall not be put to death." Then Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all these words, and Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before. When there was war again, David went out and fought the Philistines and defeated them with great slaughter, so that they fled from him. Now there was an evil spirit from the Lord on Saul, as he was sitting in his house with his spear in his hand, and David was playing the harp with his hand. And Saul tried to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he escaped from Saul's presence, so that he struck the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. Then Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him, in order to put him to death in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, informed him, saying, "If you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be put to death." So Michal let David down through a window, and he went and fled and escaped. And Michal took the household idol and laid it on the bed, and put a quilt of goat's hair at its head, and covered it with clothing. When Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, "He is sick." Then Saul sent messengers to see David, saying, "Bring him to me on his bed, so that I may put him to death." When the messengers entered, behold, the household idol was on the bed, with the quilt of goat's hair at its head. So Saul said to Michal, "Why have you betrayed me like this, and not let my enemy go, so that he has escaped?" And Michal said to Saul, "He said to me, 'Let me go. Why should I be put to death?'" So David fled and escaped, and came to Samuel at Ramah. And he informed him of everything that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and stayed at Noeth. But it was reported to Saul, saying, "Behold, David is at Noeth with Ramah." Then Saul sent messengers to take David. But when they saw the company of prophets prophesying, with Samuel standing and presiding over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. When Saul was informed of this, he sent other messengers, but they also prophesied. So Saul sent messengers again the third time, yet they prophesied. Then he went to Ramah himself, and came as far as the large well that is in Seku. And he asked, "Where are Samuel and David?" And someone said, "Behold, they are at Noeth in Ramah." So he proceeded there to Noeth in Ramah. But the Spirit of God came upon him also, so that he went along prophesying continually until he came to Noeth in Ramah. He also stripped off his clothes, and he too prophesied before Samuel, and lay down naked all that day and all night. Therefore they say, "Is Saul also among the prophets?"